Hi everyone, I think we can start now. I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen also. Okay. All right, so we are continuing from where we left off yesterday. Um, okay. So you can use the same HTML document we were using on our last session, and then we'll be using a new JS file. So you can create a new JS file. You can rename the other one and create a new JS file, which we'll be using for today's session. And today we'll be looking at if statements, switches, loops, functions, then DOM elements. So I think we can start now. So yeah, we'll start with the if statements. So in JS, when we talk of if statements, what we are trying to highlight are conditions that we want to use within our script. These conditions allow us to have certain type of functions or behaviors within our HTML page based on that particular condition. Now the if conditions come in threefold. So we have the if, the else if, and then the else. So we are saying that we would like to say if something happens, then we want to see if something happens, then we want some code to be executed, else then another code should be executed. So the if condition comes with if, then we have the condition here. Then we open this curly bracket, then we say, let here be the code to be executed. We say else and code to be executed. So what this means is that if this condition passes, then we want this code within this block to be executed. Other than that, if this condition isn't satisfied, then we should come here to the else, and then this code should be executed. Now let's have a practical view. Let's try this. So we can say if 2, right, is greater than 3, then we want to alert, and then want to say this is true, that 2 is greater than 3. If it is not, then it should alert if that it is false, which is true, which is 2 isn't greater than 3. So go to our HTML document. So I come here first. Then I open my HTML document. So I have false popping up here. So I've been alerted that the condition is false. And the condition that we are having here is that 2 is greater than 3. Now let's use the if else. So I want to say, else if. So we can say else if 2 equals to 2. Then we would want some code to be executed. And that code that we want to be executed, we should alert. So let's just say yes. 2 is equal to 2 equals to 2. So we can refresh the page again. And then we have yes, 2 equals to 2, meaning that the condition passed. And the condition that passed was that since we understand that whenever the document is being read, it starts from the top and it reads line by line towards the bottom. It starts from the if, and then it reads the condition. So it's checking whether 2 is greater than 3. It is not. So it will jam this block of code over here, which is to be executed, and then it will come to the next line. Now the next line is saying, since this hasn't passed, then we should check else if 2 is equal to 2. Now since 2 equates to 2, this block of code that has been written over here is now being executed. Now, anytime you use the if or else, it takes the condition that satisfies, and then the rest wouldn't be executed. So you realize that this block of code wasn't executed again. Okay. So this is just yeah. So that's with functions. Sorry, that's with the if statements. Now let's move on to switches. Now, when we talk about switches also act in a similar light like the if statements. But with the switches, we have a value, and then we are saying that we want to switch to that particular value. So we have a lot of expressions, and then we want to switch through those numerous expressions to see whether the value that we are looking at can be found within each of these expressions. So, for instance, I can say, let me give a variable, say, del. Say, del, this is good. So, to instantiate or like begin the switch, you just call the switch. Now the question is, what do we want to switch to? We want to switch to del. So this del now becomes our target value. So we want to switch through a number of expressions to see if those expressions are equal to this particular del, our target value over here. So we open this curly bracket. Now I know we've gone through a lot, but anytime you open a curly bracket in JavaScript, that means that you want to put in a block of code that you want to be executed. So now we've called a switch, and then we want our expressions. So what do we want to be executed? The first thing we call is the cases. So we call a case, and then we say the first case should be, let me just say case 1. Now if case 1, let's create another variable called, let's just name it, say answer. Let's just declare it and then leave it empty. Then we come down here and we say now the answer should be equal to let's just say 1 is not the right answer. Then let's break it. Then we come to the next case. So whenever you call a case, like we've done over here, we are saying this case becomes the conditions that we are running against the switch, which is our target value. So the condition 2, we say, let's say condition 2. Then we say let answer be equal to, let's just copy this. Let's say 2 is not the correct answer also. So we just copy this. Come down, paste this here, and do the same thing again. So now the del over here is this is good. Let me copy this, is good. Let me put it here. Then let me do this. 4 is not the right answer. This is good. Let's see. Yes, this seems to be the right answer. So, doing this, we want to say now document dot write. We want to write out our output into our HTML document. So we should write the answer. Let's see what happens. Let me comment these ones out so they don't run again. So what we have over here is our output. And our output is saying, yes, this seems to be the right answer. And when you go through the cases, we have case 1, and then case 1 is saying answer should be equal to 1 is not the correct answer. We go through case 2, and case 2 is saying 2 is not the correct answer. We go through the case this is good. Now, when we call the case this is good, which is a condition, we run it against the switch value over here, or the target, which is this is good, and it's saying, okay, this is good is equal to the this is good, which is the target value within the switch. So then our answer should be yes, this seems to be the right answer. Once we get the answer, we want to break the flow of the function so that it doesn't run again. Now, assuming I don't bring this break over here, this breaks over here, what is going to happen is that it is going to continue running the code. So from the point where it gets the right answer, and continues running through the code to the very end. So when you are using the case, it is advisable that once you write your condition and then it passes, what you want to do is that you want to break the conditions once your condition has been satisfied. You break the function once the condition has been satisfied. So we go back now. When we run it again, we realize our output is 4 is not the correct answer. And our output here is the way it is because that is the last value. When we come here, the condition 4 is our last condition. So it gets the value for condition 4 and then it outputs it. Meanwhile, our correct answer is the condition 3, which is this is not good. So that's that with switches. So you should be able to know when you want to use a switch and then when you want to use the if statements based on what you want to do at a particular point in time. So let me just leave this for a while. So if some of you are writing, you can get done with it. Okay, I think we can continue now. All right, so the next thing we are looking at is we want to look at loops. All right, so when we talk about loops, this just talks about an iteration. So we want to do something over and over and over and over and over again. So in JavaScript, we have a number of loops that you can use. We have the for loop. Sorry, we have the for loop. Then we have the for in loop. We have the while loop. Then we also have the do while, the for loop, for and loop, while loop, do while, and then yeah, I think it's for each. So we're looking at these loops. So I hope you can see how I'm also using the commenting within these sections. So the first thing we want to look at is try our hands on the for loop. So with the for loop, we use the for loop whenever the array or the object that we want to iterate over is finite, as in we know the length or the total number of objects within our array. So if we are conscious or we know the total number, then we can just use a for loop. And then the for loop has a syntax that goes like we have the initializer, then we have the condition. We have our condition here, then we have our increment. Then after that, we open our curly bracket and then we have what is to be executed. So we have what is to be executed over here. So this is the syntax for writing a for loop. Now, because this isn't the write script, I can't leave this. Once I leave it without commenting it, it's going to give us an error. So let me just comment that out. Come here and give a practical example of the for loop. So we want to say for. So we say the first instance an initializer. We say create a variable I, and then we say the I should be equal to 0. So when we are initializing, we want to initialize from starting point. So our starting point could be 0. Yours might be different based on what you want to do, but usually it is always 0. Then we have our conditions. So we can say we want to loop through our object as long as our value I is less than, let's create an array. So you can say it's less than, let's create an array, say A, B, C, D. Now let's get the length of this array. So to get the length, as in the total number of values within this array, we just call the dot length, then we end it with semicolon. Then the next thing is the increment. So the increment, we call our I, and then we want to say that after each and every loop, what we want to do is that we want to increment the I. And the reason for the increment is that anytime you are writing a for loop, you want to set an increment so that it will reach a particular threshold where the function can break. Otherwise, your loop is going to run endlessly. And once your loop runs endlessly, what is going to happen is that it is going to run into your memory, leaving values into your memory. Your memory is going to become full, and then your RAM wouldn't be able to process any other things. So your system will end up crashing. So we've set our initializer I is equal to 1. Now we are saying that as long as I, which has the value 0, is less than the length, and the length over here is going to be 0, is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So as long as our value 0 is less than 4, then we want to increment our value 0 by 1. So this increment is going to increase it by 1 anytime it goes through the loop. So anytime it increases it by 1, what we want to see that we want to have an alert of that increment. So we can put here, what do we want to see? We want to see the increment of I. So now we can run this. So let's comment this out also. Let's run just this. So my I at the beginning was 0. So Once it goes through the loop for the first time, it gets the value 0. The next thing is 1, 2, 3, and then that's it. So our beginning was 0. So it is going to go through this array. How many? The number of times it's going to go through this array. The number of times that equates to the length of the array. So since we have 0, 1, 2, since we have 1, 2, 3, 4, it gave us 4 outputs starting from 0. So it ended at 3. So this is an example of using the for loop. We did it because we know the length, and we calculated the length by just using the length method on our array. We can use the for in loop also, which does almost something similar. You say we can have, let's create an array. Say, let's just say AA should be equal to, let's copy the same thing. So we want to say for each value within AA, what we want to do is that we want to alert. We want to get an alert of that value. Since each time it goes through, this is going to give us the position of the values. We can just call AA and say it should give us the position, the values are the positions that is coming through the A. So let's make this a little bit fun. We can do I do this. Sorry, I do this. The actual value that I saved section for. So what I want is a. Let's see if this is going to work. Let's see. To the console, solution parentheses. Let's see. Let's just hold this to execute. It doesn't. Okay. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have. Let me just comment this out. Okay, so let's run it again. So what we have over here is now our A over here is 0, and then the value at position 0 is A. Then we have 1, and the value at position 1 is B. We have 2, and the value at position 2 is C. Then we have 3, and the value at position 3 is D. So I'm saying anytime it goes through this array, and what it's going to do is that it is going to look through this array. So it is going to go in and it's going to get only the value here, which is 0, which is the A. Then when it gets the A, it gets this whole array, and then we learned our indexing, right? So it puts the position of the value against the array, and then we get the value at this particular position, which is the A. So we are alerting the position and then the value at that particular position. I hope it's clear. So this is a way to use the for. One way also to use the for in loop. So let me just say the for in loop. And this should be for loop. This should be the follow. The next thing we want to look at is the while loop. So we do a while loop. The need for these loops is that most of the time you have a collection of objects that you want to be looping through to be performing some kind of analysis or manipulation whatsoever. So understanding how to use the loops is very key. So let's make this using the while loop. So let's just say, let's keep a variable dd and say dd should be equal to, let's instantiate it with 0. Then we call the while. So we use the while loop whenever we don't know the total number of values we are going to iterate over. So we want to say while this condition is so, then it should keep on iterating because we don't know the stop limit. So whenever we are using the while loop, we can set the breakpoint, but we don't know when it will break. We set the breakpoint based on the condition. So but what I want to do, I want to say while dd is less than 3. So this condition should be within brackets. Open the curly brackets, then I must write in the code to be executed. I want to alert my dd. Then after alerting my dd, I have to add the increments. So dd plus, so that I can break it when the condition is no longer true. So let's comment these ones out. So we have only the while loop running. So we have 0. Now it moves to 1 because we're incrementing the 0. And increment usually adds 1 to your value. So our initializer was 0, and then we alerted 0 the first time. Now after alerting 0, what we did was that we incremented the 0, added 1 to the 0 over here. It became 1, and then it went through the loop again. 1 is less than 3, so it alerted 1, and then it added 1 to 1, giving us 2. It came here again, then 2 is less than 3. It alerted us with 2, and then it came here again to the increment, giving us 3. Now when it came here, 3 is not less than 3. 3 is equal to 3. So because this condition does not satisfy the logic, then this block of code no longer runs. Okay. The next is the do while loop. We use the do while loop on certain occasions when we want the first instance of our block of code to run, whether our condition is true or false, at least once. So we want to say do something, right? So let's just say let's alert. Let's use more of the alerts that the document would write. It should alert us with the value true just once, and it should alert us with the value true while let's say, so I have dd while dd is equal to 1. So let's say equal to what dd equals to 1. So from here we know that dd is equal to 0 because we have dd is equal to 0 over here. Now 0 doesn't equate to 1, right? So this function shouldn't run. But because we are saying that with the do while, it is going to execute the code within our curly brackets at least once, whether or not the condition is satisfied. So it is going to alert us true for once, then it wouldn't alert us true again. So let's look at our output. So we have true over here, and then it breaks. It doesn't run again because for the first time, we are saying that what happens is that it is going to run our JavaScript file is going to be run from the top to the down. So the first time it runs it, this is the first command it should do. So it is going to run this particular code, whether or not the function is true or false. Then once it runs it, it comes and then it reads the condition, and then once it comes here again, it makes sure that until this condition has been satisfied, this block of code isn't executed. Let's look at something. Save ABD should be equal to, let's say 10, right? Then we want to say we should alert us with ABD. After alerting it, let us increment the ABD. I want to check if the ABD, which is 10 over here, you should do so. Let's set the value, let's say to 13. So it should be less than or equal to. Let's try it. Let's see. So we have 10, we have 11, 12, 13, and then it breaks. So what we are seeing here is that the first thing that happens is that since the block of code should start running from the top to the bottom, it runs the first alert, which is 10, then it starts incrementing it. So after alerting us 10, it increments it to 11. But then we come here to our while loop, and then we read the condition saying that while what our code is 11 is less than or equal to 13, right? Since it's less than or equal to 13, it should keep on doing this. So it comes here and then it alerts us the 11, then it increments it by 1, comes to 12, then goes through the condition again. 12 is less than or equal to 13, which is true. So it comes here and then does the function again. So once it gets to 13, 13 is also less than or equal to, since 13 is equal to 13, it runs it. But because it increments it and then comes to 14, 14 isn't less than or equal to 13, so the function breaks. It doesn't run again. So we've looked at so we have so far looked at the for loop, the for in loop, the while loop, the do while loop. So we can look at the for each. So we use the for each also to loop over an array or a collection of objects. But with the for loop, we use callbacks. And we explained the last time that callbacks are functions or collables. So we want to do something like so I think I should have an array. Let's create a new array, right? Let's say CC should be equal to let's say mango then orange. So we have CC. Now we want to say CC dot for each. We want to put a callable here. What callable do we want? We want to say we want to call this alert. Yes. Now we've placed a callable over here, but this callable, this function isn't defined, so we define the function by saying function should be alert this. Then you should take an argument argument should be the value. Then we open the curly bracket. What do we want this function to do? We want it to alert us with the value. So let's comment this out, then run and see our outputs. So we have our first output. Remember, it is a loop. So we are saying for each instance of the values within the array, it should alert us with that particular value. So mango, apple, then orange, then our loop ends. So what we've done over here is that we are saying for each time that it goes into CC, which is this array, it should alert us. And what alert us is doing is that it is getting each value and then it will alert us with the value. So that is how to use the for each way of looping through a collection of items. Okay, so we are done with the loops. Also, we want to look at functions shortly. So functions. When we talk about function, a function is you giving something, you give something an identity. So when we talk about function, you write statements. So we talk of statements that gives an identity to something. So after giving the identity to something, then it gives that identity a purpose. So statement that gives an identity to something, and that identity comes with a purpose. This is my own understanding of the basic way for me to understand functions. So when I say function jet is an identity, a name for a function. So the function, a statement that gives an identity, that identity is jet, and then jet has a purpose. The purpose of jet is to do something. So functions are callable. So whenever we say functions are callable, I'm saying that anytime jet is called, jet is the identity, but then something appears which is the purpose of jet. So an example, to start a function, we call the function. You always start with function, not always, but one of the ways to do so is to start with function. When you start with function, the next thing is the identity, which is the name of the function. So we have the function name. Now after the function name, you can choose to put in arguments over here. Should your function need an argument? That's, we usually put in arguments if the function that we want to write is dynamic. Dynamic means that the function has inputs that are changeable, so the inputs can change. But if our inputs wouldn't change and then we want to write a functional program, then we wouldn't use any arguments over here because they wouldn't change, so we leave it empty. Then we have here the purpose. The purpose is so we say what the function does. So we have the purpose over here. So we have our function, we're giving it an identity, and then the purpose is what the function should do. So function statements that give an identity to something, and that identity comes with a purpose. So for example, I give the function, we just created a function. Let me just copy that function and then explain it. So we created a function over here, right? So let me just copy this. Then comment this. We created this function over here. So we said function, and then we gave it an identity. The identity is alerted. Now, because we know that our values are dynamic, it isn't constant and it is changing because we're looking through an array. We use an argument over here called a value. Now, this is the purpose of the function. The purpose of the function is that it's supposed to alert us with this part. It's supposed to alert us with a value, right? So it's alerted us with a value over here. Okay, so the benefits of writing functions is that the first thing, it allows you to write less code. So for instance, because I have this function, there's no need for me to write the same function again at a later point in time when I want to do something like this again. So we write functions so that we'll be able to reuse that same function. So like it's much more like your name, right? You have a name, an identity. Whenever somebody calls you and then you appear, you have a nature which tells you who you are and how you behave and operate. It's the same with functions. So that's a little about function. Another way of writing a function is by using the function object. So with that, we can give it a variable name and say, let's just call this, funcs. Funcs. Then we say it's a new function. Then we pass in our arguments, but this time around our arguments must come in string. So we can say a, then e, then we say you should return a plus b. So now I can come down here and call funcs and then put in 2 and then 2. So let's look at what's going to happen. 2 and 2. So let's translate this. So we have an output over here. 2 plus 2 is going to give us 4. So we wrote a function that is just adding values. So another way of writing functions is by using the function object. You create a new function object. Then this is our argument. And then this is our return statement. Now the return statement is also a way of making sure that whatever commands that you pass within your function, you are able to output the result of those commands. So we realize that when we use these alerters, we're just alerting the value. But what if the value over here, we wanted to use it somewhere else within our code again? So we can use the return to return this value, get it, and then use it at a later point in time within our code. Okay, that's with functions. Then today we are looking at a lot of topics, and I'm trying to be as clear and precise as much as I can. We'll look at this DOM more in our next session, but let me just go through it a little. So when we talk of DOM, DOM stands for Documents Object Model. Document object model. So our HTML document is this document over there, and whenever our HTML document is loaded on a web page, it becomes a document object. Now this model allows us to be able to interact with our document object, which is our HTML page, for us to be able to manipulate the contents within the HTML document. So some of the DOM DOM methods that we'll be able to use to further manipulate our HTML documents includes get element. We get an element by ID. And as we go on also, you guys should take note of the structure of the namings. JavaScript is this camel case. I think I hinted on this when we began. So camel case means that it starts with a small letter, then each starting word or beginning character of the rest of the statements begin with a capital letter. So we see get elements starts with a capital letter, the by starts with a capital letter, ID also starts with a capital letter. So this allows us to get the ID of an HTML of a particular. It allows us to get the ID of a particular, say, div or tag or whatsoever. We have get elements. So this isn't get element. This is get elements by class name. The reason why this allows us to get the classes within our HTML documents. The reason why this is get elements and not elements is because usually we use the classes for multiple instances. So you can call class. So the same name for classes within different, so many times within our HTML documents, but with our IDs are unique. So you can only get one ID at the point in time within your HTML document. So you can only get an element. But here you can get elements. We have get elements by tag name, and then get elements by name. So these also do the same thing. You get elements by the tags that you specify, and then you get the elements by the name that you specify within your HTML documents. So once you get them, you'll be able to do further manipulations to the content within your HTML document. So this is just an intro into the DOM elements. On Friday, we'll look at the DOM elements, then we move to jQuery. So jQuery is just, say, a lighter version of JavaScript. So once you guys really understand the JavaScript, it will be easy for you to manipulate your way around jQuery because jQuery is much more simpler and easy to go about. So I end the session here, and then the floor is currently open for further questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you for the session. I don't know if it's an oversight from my end. The semicolon, I think you use it occasionally. At what point do you use the semicolon?
So earlier on with JavaScript, you are supposed to use the semicolon to state that you've ended a particular line of code, right? But currently, you can still keep it, but when you don't bring it, it doesn't harm your code. It doesn't do anything to your code.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. But what it does is that it signifies that you've ended a particular line of code.
Okay. So it's just for readability's sake.
We can say that also. But earlier on, it was also for readability, but if it wasn't there, it will give you an error saying that you have omitted it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Steven, I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, this is the first time I'll be joining this video chat. I don't know if the previous session if I have access to them.
Come again with your question. I didn't hear you clearly.
Okay, I said this is the first time I'm appearing video chat. I don't know if I have access to the previous session.
Yeah, so the previous sessions are on YouTube channel, so you can access the channel to get the videos, and then you can go through them. And if there are any questions or you face any challenge, there's also a GitHub page where you can put in your issues, and then we can attend to them also.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Sorry, I forgot to.
Can you hear me?
Can I ask a question?
Okay, yeah, you can ask a question.
The schedule for this video call, is it every evening or every 2 days? Is there a schedule?
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a schedule. Okay, I think Ernest would answer that thing.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I think that was one of the things I wanted to mention before the meeting comes to an end. You know, on the platform, I run a poll on some 2 sets of meeting dates. Yeah, and from the poll as it stands now, I think majority are going for Mondays and Thursdays. Right. So after this week, there is going to be a break for our colleagues who are still lagging behind. So I'm getting, like, we get feedback from some of our colleagues, and majority of them, they are still lagging behind. So from our last meeting for this week will be on Friday. Then the following week there wouldn't be any class. Then after that week, we'll resume fully, and we are going to start from. We will be using the new days. That's the Mondays and Thursdays. So we will be assuming during that 1 week, right? During that 1 week, all those who are lagging behind can catch up with the class. Then you can now join us after the 1 week break. But after the 1 week break, we will dive more into the Jupyter development. That's the main reason why we are leaving that 1 week for all those who are lagging behind to catch up with the class. So that when we get into the web GIS or the portal development, we wouldn't leave anyone behind. We want all of us to be on the same wavelength as we move along from that point. So let's take advantage of the 1 week break so that we can catch up with the rest of the class. Thank you very much. Be well.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry.